Last video, I compared the HP Omen Max 16 with the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16, but it was clear that they were pretty different and not for the same people. Well, Asus has other options as well, so today I'll be comparing the Omen Max 16 with the more equal in size STRIX G16. Who makes the better gaming laptop in the same form factor, HP or Asus? Well, let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. Just a quick note beforehand, this year there are two types of STRIX models. The one I have in this video is the AMD variant, which has the old STRIX design, but there's also a redesigned STRIX, which only has Intel processors. But I decided to choose the AMD one because it's simply faster and cheaper than the Intel option. Anyways, from the outside, they're made of two different materials. The STRIX does have a metal lid, which feels sturdy. But it has plastic accents and a fully plastic bottom, which feels a little bit cheap. The Omen, on the other hand, is fully metal on the top and bottom, so it feels a little more sturdy. These two are both very rigid on the inside. The STRIX does flex less on the keyboard, even if it's just a little bit. The Omen also has a glass bezel and display, while the STRIX is all plastic, which might look a little cheaper. The Omen in general just has an overall more premium feeling. But that higher quality material does add a little weight. It's not a huge difference, but the STRIX is quite a bit more comfortable to carry around with one hand. In terms of thickness, they're almost identical, so pretty average for a gaming laptop with a lot of cooling. Now on the inside, these two have almost identical specs. But once again, we're comparing the best of AMD to the best of Intel. So this should be interesting. They also both have the highest possible wattages available for a laptop 5070 Ti, but while the Omen Max can be spec'd all the way up to an RTX 5090, this AMD STRIX model can only go up to a 5070 Ti. If you want a higher tier GPU, you have to get the new redesigned models. But an RTX 5070 Ti should be more than enough for every single game that's out now and a couple years into the future, so this shouldn't be a huge problem. Now, they both actually have an almost identical port selection, which means a lot of connectivity. But the Omen also has a couple ports on the back side, which is handy for keeping cables out of the way. Technically, the Omen has Thunderbolt 4, while the STRIX has USB 4, but this is really not a huge difference. And despite having almost the exact same specs, the Omen has a way bulkier power brick, which you will probably feel in your backpack. You'll see why it needs all this extra wattage later on in the video. They both support USB-C charging as well, so you could always just use a smaller brick for if you're on the go. Their keyboards are also pretty different. They both do have a full per-key RGB backlight, which means you can cook up some pretty cool looking effects. But while the STRIX has a more classic looking RGB keyboard, the Omen has this very unique design, which almost looks like the keys are floating on water. Here's how the actual keys sound. The Omen sounds and feels a little bit more clicky, while the STRIX feels and sounds more like a classic laptop keyboard. That unique design on the Omen might come at the cost of usability though. The keys are very close to each other, and it's a bit harder to blindly find keys with your fingers. I only found this to be a problem in the beginning though. Once you actually get used to this keyboard, these two are equally as good to type on. Now for the little things, the Omen has half-size up and down keys, while the STRIX has full-size arrow keys. And the STRIX has 5 reprogrammable macro keys at the top here, while the Omen has a full-size numpad. But the STRIX actually also has a numpad, which strangely brings us to their trackpads. They're about the same size, but the STRIX is a little bit bigger. But what you can't see is that it actually has a touch-based numpad built into the trackpad. Obviously, this won't be better than actual physical keys, but it's a pretty cool way to implement it. And you can always just turn it off if you don't use it. Now, the STRIX's trackpad is made of glass, while the Omen is likely plastic. I do prefer the click on the Omen though. It's very satisfying. But when we look at their displays, there is a clear winner. The Strix has a pretty okay IPS display, but the Omen has an almost flawless 2.5K OLED display. And these two are night and day. OLED outdoes IPS in almost every way. It has better looking colors, way higher contrast, and if we compare the blacks, yeah, it's not even close. And while they can both technically go up to 500 nits, OLED just looks a lot brighter. They both do have a 240 Hz refresh rate though, so they'll both be awesome for gaming. OLED technically has a faster response time, but most people won't notice this difference. They do have a different coating though. The Strix has a matte display, while the Omen is glossy, with a slight anti-reflection layer. So the Omen has more reflections, but looks a little crisper, while the Strix has way less reflections, but more glare. Which one do you prefer? Do not get me wrong, the Strix G16 has a perfectly fine display. It's even pretty good, but compared to the Omen Max's OLED, yeah, this is not even a competition. As for their display hinges, the Omen opens up a tiny bit further than the Strix, but the Strix has less display wobble, which is nice for if you move around a lot with your laptop. But here's where it gets interesting, their speakers. I've gone back and forth between these two so many times. They are really close. The Omen has more bass and treble, but sounds a bit muffled. While the Strix sounds a lot clearer and gets louder, but lacks that little bit of punch. The microphone on the Strix sounds better and less robotic, but their webcam quality is a bit different. The Strix is a bit softer, while the Omen looks sharper, but a little bit red. Now, what you've all been waiting for, performance. These are two of the fastest laptop chips that Intel and AMD have to offer. So which one is faster? Well, in Cinebench, they are very close. The Strix's AMD chip is slightly faster in multi-core performance, while the Omen's Intel chip is slightly faster in single-core. And in 3D Mark TimeSpy, it shouldn't be a surprise that they score basically the same, because both of these GPUs have identical power limits. But benchmarks do not show the entire picture. You need a CPU and GPU mixed workload to see which one is faster. And this AMD chip has 3D V-cache, and some games take a lot of advantage of this. So, let's play some games.
You'll never take me down.
What did you do, man? No!
Now that's a big difference in performance. In every single game I tested, the Strix outperformed the Omen by a little bit or ran at very similar frame rates. But in CPU-intensive games like Rust and Counter-Strike, it was an absolute massacre for the Omen. It's not even close. In those games, that 3D V-cache is being utilized very well. Of course, not every game makes use of this, but in the games that do, well, you saw the difference. But why was the Omen slower in less CPU-intensive games as well? These two chips were super close in the benchmarks, right? Well, the Intel chip in the Omen uses quite a bit more power than the AMD chip in the Strix. And laptops can only use so much power, so the CPU was actually stealing a bit of power away from the GPU, which made it perform a little worse. But this is not the entire story, and there's a lot more going on under the hood. In heavy games, the Strix ran at a very reasonable temperature, no thermal throttling or anything abnormal. But the Omen ran way too hot. This chip was thermal throttling hard, but there's a reason for this. On the Omen, you can set way higher power limits than the laptop can handle. You'll get higher performance, sure, but the cooling system just is not bulky enough, and the CPU starts thermal throttling. When you put these higher power limits down though, these temperature issues get fixed, at least a little bit. Peak temperatures of 99 degrees is still very hot. But at these lower power limits, it does perform worse, so I'd say the Strix wins here. That AMD chip uses less power, which creates less heat and just overall better performance. And apparently, it also creates less noise. Yes, you can create custom fan curves for each one, but these are the defaults. Also, while doing nothing, the Omen's fans are just almost always turned on, while the Strix stays completely silent. Now as for battery life, yeah, don't buy these laptops expecting them to last long. They both suck. I tested their batteries in two scenarios, under light use and during gaming. In the light use case, I played a YouTube video until their batteries died, with their displays at full brightness, at 60 Hz, and with their dedicated GPUs turned off. And like I said, do not buy these gaming laptops if you're on the move a lot, because actual battery life will likely be even worse than these numbers. In the gaming test, I played Battlefield 1 until their batteries died, with the same settings as before. And you should not buy a gaming laptop if you want to play games on battery. A Steam Deck or a handheld PC are a lot more suitable for that. Now, these both are THICC gaming laptops, so they have quite a lot of space for upgradeability. They both have fully upgradable RAM, which is great. But for all the other upgradable parts, there's a big downside for the Omen. They both do have two M.2 SSD slots for upgradable storage, but on the Omen, the pre-installed drive sits under the vapor chamber. And they both also have an upgradable Wi-Fi card, but again, it is under the vapor chamber for the Omen. So if you want to upgrade the Wi-Fi card or SSD 1 on the Omen, you have to remove the entire vapor chamber. And that means you also have to repaste the entire thing, which you shouldn't really randomly do. But price is a very big factor as well. So which one of these wins in terms of value? Well, it really depends on the model. For these exact same specs from the video, the Strix is a little cheaper. It's simple as that. But for the Omen, you also have options with less powerful AMD CPUs that are a lot cheaper. But so does the Strix, and those are even cheaper. I actually think this might be the cheapest 5070 Ti gaming laptop that money can buy. So I lied to you. The Strix is pretty much always the cheaper option. Which finally brings us to our conclusion. Which one of these is the better pick? The HP Omen Max 16 or the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16? Well, I'm gonna have to go with the Strix here. Yes, the display is quite a bit worse and it's a little plasticky compared to the Omen, but it is simply a lot faster. It runs at a lower temperature and it's still very sturdy. The Omen is not a bad laptop though. It has a beautiful display, beautiful keyboard, and just has better build materials. But I think the Strix is just objectively the better gaming laptop here. Not to mention, it's a lot cheaper. Get the Omen if you want a better display, get the Strix if you care more about performance. That's pretty much it. Now let me give a huge shout out to my YouTube members. Soundwife, Thomas, Inky, Mr. Frosty Dude, Dropzone1, Martijn Snijkers, Flimsy, Aki, Disco Volante, Daniel, Mr. Nuke, Sebastian, Christian Sands, Real Elf, Alan, Toasted, Suryansh, Eric the Rad, Walter, Wesley Rhodes, Michael, Ghost Data, and Toff. If you become a YouTube member, you get early access to content of mine, a shout out at the end of every video, and you'll also be supporting me as a creator to make these videos. And of course, you'll also be part of the Cool Guys Club. so you can use cool emojis like these in the comment section. So join the club if you're interested. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.